Hi, this is Dr. Karen Wilson Starks, your host for the Voice of Leadership, the show for business executives and global corporations who appreciate a principled biblical lens on leadership, featuring the song Consuming Fire by gospel jazz saxophonist Ron McMillan. You are listening to our Resource Renewal Series featuring shows for times such as these. Today, I'm talking with you about 3 critical success factors for high-performance teams. So the first thing you might wonder is, what is a team? Well, first of all, a team is a group of people whose work really requires that they are interdependent. In other words, you can't get your job done without the other people and without all of you working together. So, for example, just imagine a surgical team. On a surgical team, you're in the operating room, you have a number of physicians, you'll have nurses, and various other staff. Everybody's got a different role, a different job, and they're all critical to doing the surgery effectively. Or alternatively, you could also think about an airline crew. So just imagine if you were flying the plane. In the plane, there was nothing but flight attendants. There weren't any pilots, no co-pilots, no navigators, no other people on the plane. You probably wouldn't get very far. So the point is, all the people together are working in a synergistic way. They're all necessary in order to have a team. Now, what makes the team high performance are a couple of factors. One, each person is very well skilled in their particular craft, and each person is bringing unique skills that are needed by that team. Just as I said before, you don't have all nurses in the operating room, you don't have all physicians in the operating room, you have a mix. So high quality ability and mixed ability. So the 3 critical success factors that I want to talk about for high-performance teams today, number 1 would be communication. No matter what's going on, the team members must keep each other informed at all times. Any changes, any observations, even those aspects that don't seem to be important. If something looks like it's not on time, it looks like it may be different from what the typical expectation is. It looks like it's running late. No matter what that change difference is, you want to be able to say, hey, take a look at this. You want to point it out and keep each other constantly informed about what's going on. So that's a high level of constant communication that's taking place in a high-performance team, because that information is necessary to make shifts, to know what to do different. So that's number 1, communication. Number 2 would be willingness to give each other feedback. Willingness to give each other feedback. So let's say the navigator is in the cockpit and the navigator notices something unusual and notices that maybe the way the pilot was speaking on the loudspeaker perhaps was with a voice that sounded like an intensity or panic. Well, the navigator might want to give the pilot that information, because you don't want the passengers panicking, and especially if there's nothing to panic over. And if there is something to panic over, you still want them to be calm. So you've got to give each other feedback in real time on a regular basis, again, so that you have the opportunity to shift behavior. Then the third point of being a high-performance team is that you are continually learning together. Continually learning together. So that might mean that after a surgical procedure is done, that team might sit down and have what we used to call in the military an after-action review. So what went well with how we worked together as a team? How did the surgery go? Obviously, you want to have the outcome of the actual procedure and the surgery. And more importantly, too, how did we as a surgical team achieve our goals, objectives, and mission, and how we were working together? What did we do well? And if we were doing this the next time, what would we do differently? And it's this continual learning together that actually keeps the team high performance. Because if you don't learn from your experiences, you'll keep doing the same things and maybe repeating the same errors because no one's actually sat down and looked at it to say, what could we do different or what should we do different? So, if you want to have a high performance team, make sure that there's ongoing continual communication. Number two, make sure you are willing to give each other feedback that's specific, that's behavioral, that's measurable, and you're thinking about what kind of behavior would look better the next time. And then thirdly, have after action reviews where you look at not just what went wrong, but also what did you do well? Because you also want to repeat the actions that were effective for you the next time around. Okay, I want you to imagine what we call a Venn diagram, which is actually three concentric circles, and they're actually overlapping with a space in the middle where all three come together. So imagine that one of the circles has the word communication in it, as we've been talking about already. Then imagine that the next circle has the word feedback, and the third circle has learning. So, what I want to share with you is what I have seen over the years in my experience and working with a variety of organizations. So, for example, if I'm working with an organization, they've got communication going on and they have feedback going on. However, they're missing that learning piece that we talked about. Well, that organization is what I call the one hit wonder. And they're a one hit wonder because they may do something right in this one situation or scenario, but because they are not taking the time to do that after action review and to mine the learning for the long term, it's not applied throughout the organization or the rest of their experience. So they're the one hit wonder. Okay, so now let's imagine that you have an organization where feedback is in place, learning is in place, but that ongoing communication is missing. This is the organization that I refer to as the deaf organization. They don't have ongoing communication. They're not hearing each other. They're not paying attention in real time to what's going on. So they're missing opportunities to leverage change and behavior as they go along. So though they might do the after action review, they're giving feedback and they can apply it to some things in the future. In the moment with whatever they did, they could have actually been like that race car pit team and done it on the fly and actually applied it to that race. So that organization is deaf. Then, if we come around the Venn diagram and we see an organization that has the learning part in place, they have the communication in place, but they're missing that feedback to the individual players in the organization. That team is what I call the squandering organization. They've got top talent that they're not choosing to develop, not choosing to give play by play feedback and instruction. So it's like having a great Michael Jordan on the team and you're not leveraging that. So that's the squandering organization. Now, obviously, the organizations that I'm working with, my best clients, we are in that sweet spot where we've got the communication working, we've got the feedback working, we've got the learning working, and that's the high performance team organization. And that's where you want to be also. So if you want to launch and or further develop a high performance team, let's get together and I'll help you get there and show you how to do it. One of the most important jobs of the senior leader and executive is actually making crucial decisions. Most often, it's making decisions with very limited information. Now, what I have seen in my work is that executives often fall in a couple different extreme camps. One extreme camp is the executive who's into the analysis paralysis. They take so long trying to gather all the necessary information that really they're paralyzed and the organization is paralyzed. And in fact, the organization is held hostage because they can't make the decision at all. You want to avoid that extreme, obviously. And then, of course, there's the other extreme where it's really more like a ready, fire, aim kind of an approach. So decisions may be made maybe without enough information. And in this case, the organization spins into a state of chaos. So there really is that delicate balance between these two extremes. And to figure out how are you going to make decisions quickly when information is limited. So here's one of the things I would say about that. First of all, you want to examine what is the best information that you have today. And then number two, you want to make your best decision in good faith with the information that you have available. And then thirdly, remember that most decisions are not permanent and most decisions aren't life and death. There are some exceptions. However, since it's the case that most aren't permanent and most aren't life and death, you can, number three, make adjustments or even change your decision as new information comes in. So you don't have to be able to know the future or read the crystal ball today to figure out what to do. You're making the decision today based on what you know today. And if tomorrow you know something different, then make a different decision at that time. And I have found that this has freed up so many of my clients is to think about it in this way, rather than to imagine that they have to know the end all be all today for the rest of their lives in the organization. So let's say I decide today that I'm going to do X, and I find out that tomorrow that X has a consequence that I really didn't know about. Well, when tomorrow comes, I can change that decision to something else and avoid that consequence. Now, when I mentioned there are some exceptions, and I'm thinking about the example that's certainly been made very popular when Captain Sullenberger was flying the airplane that needed to make a uncharacteristic landing on the Hudson River. He had split seconds to decide what to do, and it was a life and death decision in terms of his choices. And in a case like that, he had to do several things. One, he had to trust the training that he had had over the years. He had to trust the experience that he had over the years, and also the instincts in the moment. And he was second guessed after the fact a number of times by people wondering, did he really make the wisest decision? Did he make the right decision? In those moments, however, and he was a seasoned pilot, he had to trust that training, experience, and instincts, do what he thought was best. And as a result, he saved multiple lives and landed safely on the Hudson River. So for those few occasions when you are in those scenarios, remember you are in senior leadership because you have had a lot of experiences along the way. You have seen many scenarios in your life up to this point, and quickly you can come to a decision based on that fund of experience and knowledge and information that you have. I also like to share with my clients just some thoughts from a model that was put out by Vroom and Yetton in the early 1970s. And that was Victor Vroom and Philip Yetton. And they had a model that pertained to decision making where you want to think about three different components: quality, acceptance, and time. And you want to think about them in this order. So first of all, you want to make a decision that is a quality decision. So clearly, when it comes down to landing an airplane, a quality decision is one that preserves life first, and then, when possible, the equipment as well, and doesn't harm anybody on the ground or property and so on and so forth. So you can make decisions that cause a lot of destruction or that cause a lot of harm, or that don't produce the kind of, let's say, business result in terms of profit or gain, or don't get the customer the outcome that they're looking for. So we want a quality decision, number one. And you want to preserve that as the first thing you do. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. And then, secondly, the second thing you preserve is acceptance. In other words, if I make this decision and decide in this way, how likely is it that people who need to implement it are actually going to follow through and implement it and do it in this way? And if you really need their acceptance, you need their implementation, because it's going to be their bodies doing the work, then you have to make sure that that decision is one that they will accept, will buy into, and actually will accomplish. So that's the second thing you preserve. The third thing you preserve is speed. In other words, you do the fastest thing you can do that, first of all, preserves the quality, so it's not a dumb decision, and secondly, that will be accepted and actually implemented. And so sometimes what's fastest might actually seem slow because it might take more effort to preserve quality and acceptance. So some leaders jump in there and just say, okay, I'm going to make a command decision. I'm going to do X. And they may not have all the information they need to make a quality decision. Maybe others in the organization have that information. So first of all, quality might not even be preserved. Then secondly, maybe it was a quality decision, but the people who have to do this work, they disagree with it and they don't understand the reason for it. They didn't have a voice in participating in creating that decision. And so now you've got people sabotaging that decision and they're not carrying it out. So it's not happening anyway. So you really haven't gained anything to go fast by suddenly making a command decision when in fact you might have needed to slow down to make sure you had the information necessary for quality and also the conversations that are necessary for acceptance. So when we think about that, there were at least about 5 different ways that Vroom and Yetton talked about that you could decide by. In one case, case number 1, you would decide alone. Now, you would only decide alone if you already had the information that would say it's a quality decision. So maybe it's a simple problem. It's not that complex. And you already have that information right at your desk, right on your computer. And by deciding alone, you already know that acceptance is not an issue. In other words, nobody else has to implement this, so it doesn't matter. Or the people who do have to implement it, they trust your judgment and they want you to make this decision because it saves time for them and they will implement whatever you decide. So that's great. You can sit at your desk, put your feet up, and decide alone in that case. Number 2, what you're doing in number 2 is you're gathering information because you might not have all the information you need to make a quality decision. However, you're still deciding alone. In this case, I know what information I need to get, and I also know where the information is. The information might be in a file cabinet, it might be in a certain file drawer, it may be resident in a specific person. I can go to that person or persons and get the information, but I'm still pretty much operating on my own. I'm going to the file cabinet. I'm going to the people necessary. I'm gathering the information. I'm still going back to my desk and I'm still deciding alone, which implies that number 1, I've got the quality information I need to make a quality decision and that this decision can be implemented and accepted because people will accept it or it doesn't require them, their action. All right, so that's number 2. Number 3, now I'm consulting with individuals about whatever the decision is. In this case, maybe I'm not so sure about all the information that I might need in order to make a quality decision. However, I do have some idea about who might have perspective on that. So let's say it's 3 people in my organization, and I know that they have some viewpoint that would be useful. So I go to them not just to extract numbers, data, information, and walk away and they don't know why I've collected this information, but now I share the problem with them. I say, here's the decision I'm really trying to make. I'm trying to decide if we should go down pathway A or pathway B. And here's what I'm thinking so far. And then they tell me, well, here are some of the advantages of pathway A. Here are some disadvantages of pathway A. Here are the advantages of B. And in reality, we think you might want to look at C. And as I interview all 3 people, I'm actually gaining perspectives that I didn't have before. And I'm still in a situation where acceptance is either already there in terms of implementation or it's not necessary. So, with this consultation and the information I've gathered, and perhaps they've even referred me to a fourth or fifth person I should also consult, I can still go back to my desk and make the decision by myself. So, that's number three. Number four, I'm now realizing that I may not even know who has the information that's important for making a quality decision. I might have to bring that whole team or group together, and we might have to have a conversation. So when I bring the whole team and group together, I say to them, you know, I'm consulting you as a group because we need to decide whether we're going to take path A or path B. I'm still going to make that decision. So I'm making it clear they're not deciding that. I'm retaining the decision making authority. However, I'm consulting them first. I want their input because, for one thing, I'm aware that I do need their buy in, I do need their acceptance, I need their implementation for implementing whatever it is we're going to do. And I also know that they have information that relates to quality in this decision, such that if I don't hear from them, I could go away and make a decision that's a poor decision. So let's say after I consult with the group, get information from them, go away, and then decide alone in that case. That's the fourth approach. The fifth approach is I know that I don't have all the information. I know I need to bring it to the group. I know I need to bring it to the team. However, now I also know that their acceptance is huge. Maybe there's been a lot of bickering. I know that there's not agreement about what we should do, and there are different viewpoints on it. However, I also know that each one of my people is really committed to the organization and to the goals of the organization. And they're as committed to the quality decision as I am, and to acceptance as I am, and also to working together so I can trust them to make a group decision. So when I bring it to them, I say, it's not just consultation. As a group, we are going to decide what to do. We're going to, by the process of consensus or whatever, come up with that final decision. Now, when it's a group decision, I might have some boundaries or some parameters. Maybe we are making an investment decision that has a dollar amount attached to it. I can say to them, here's the budget. And that may be part of the parameters that's assigned to the project. When I'm bringing it to the group, they know in advance that whatever decision they make collectively, I have just a voice in that, and we're all deciding together. Now, what derails the process is if I'm doing a fake group decision, and a fake group decision is I come to them and say it's a group decision, and then when they come up with something that I don't like as the leader, I snatch it back and say, now I'm deciding. People don't trust you anymore after that. So if you've assessed that it should be a group decision, then that's what you stay with and let the group decision stand. Now, obviously, there are times to do each of these five approaches. And whatever you decide to do, sometimes deciding alone is the best in terms of preserving quality and acceptance and speed. Sometimes you have to go all the way down to that mutual group decision in order to preserve quality and acceptance. And it's the mutual decision that's really the fastest in terms of preserving those two. Each situation will be different. The time you would never use the mutual decision is if your people are not committed to the goals of the organization. It's okay if they may have disagreements amongst themselves, but if they're not in agreement with the goals and values of the organization, then as the leader, you want to use one of the other strategies that preserves both quality, acceptance, and then speed as the third variable. Fortunately, not all the decisions that we make really are life and death decisions, as I've said. In fact, most of them are not. So, to avoid those extremes we mentioned at the beginning of analysis paralysis, where you hold the organization hostage, or the ready, fire, aim situation where you cause your organization to spin out of control into chaos, I've laid out some tools today that you can use to really analyze the decisions that you make. You can preserve quality, you can preserve acceptance, you can preserve time, go as fast as you can, as long as quality and acceptance are actually preserved. That's one model for getting there. You can also, in those really emergency situations, trust your training, trust your experience, and trust your instincts. You can also remember that what you choose to do today is based on the best information you have today, and you're making that best decision in good faith. Should you get new information tomorrow, you can change your mind and you can make adjustments. And then there are 5 ways you can make the decisions that preserve quality and acceptance. Either decide alone, get information and decide alone, consult with individuals and decide alone, consult with the group and decide alone, or consult with the group and have a mutual group decision where the group then decides. So there you have it. Lots of ways you could proceed, lots of ways you could go. And here's my challenge to you for this week. My challenge is take at least one or two of these tools, apply it to a decision that you have in the workplace, and remember, quality first, acceptance second, and time and speed the last consideration. All right, have fun and let me know how it goes, and I'll see you next time. Here's what I want to talk about today. I want to remind you that legacy minded leaders plan ahead. And what they plan ahead for is the future of the organization. So today we're going to talk about succession planning and building future sustainability. So when leaders are thinking ahead, you want to think about what is it that the organization is going to be doing in the future. So what are those job directions or job tasks or ways that you're going to contribute in the future? Secondly, then, what are the skills and the capacities and capabilities that are going to be needed in order to deliver on those kinds of results? And then, thirdly, what kind of people do you need to bring into the organization who have those skills, who have those capabilities, and who will be able to actually contribute to that future agenda and what this company or what this organization is going to be about in the future? Now, here's what I find, and that's this. In order to really be successful, you have to think about succession planning not so much as an event, but more as an organic part of your culture and who you are. It means that you are creating a culture of development, developing people individually and also developing teams. And it's not just taking a name and placing that name next to a job, and you have this targeted list, maybe of 10 people or 20 people or whatever it is for succession planning in your organization. However, you have everyone's name in mind somehow, and you're thinking about how can I maximize this person's growth, development, and contribution in the organization. And that's understanding that everyone is going to have a different level of ability. So let's say on a scale from 1 to 10, you may have some people on your team who can contribute at a level of a 2, and you need that person to be a 2. In other words, their job function may be, let's say, defined as a 2. You want them to be an excellent 2. So to be an excellent 2, that person still needs growth experiences, they still need development, and you want them to have that even though they may not progress beyond that level of 2. They're great doing 2s, they like 2 work, and you need 2 work to be done. There are others in the organization who are going to rise to the level of a 10, let's say. And that person also needs growth experiences and challenges, different ones. However, they are progressing forward from 2 to 3, maybe skipping over to 5 or whatever, and eventually ending up at that level 10. All of those people, though, are going to need 3 things. And these are the 3 things I want you to think about. Number 1, they're going to need experiences at work and challenges at work that actually build their skill. So you want to ask, what are the job challenges, the job experiences that each person needs to keep them sharp and to build their skill in the workplace? Number two, they're going to need maybe some training. Perhaps it could be training in-house, or you might send them away for training. Maybe some assessment, even some assessment tools to see where they are on different variables as a leader. So there's training and assessment that people need, whether done in-house or outside. And then thirdly, they need some coaching and some mentoring in place. And some of that coaching and mentoring is going to come from their leaders in-house. And in some cases, sometimes you might have to go outside and bring in coaching and mentoring from outside sources as well. The bottom line is that if you are a legacy-minded leader and you're focusing on succession planning, then you are always growing leaders. And you have what I'm going to call an abundance mindset more than a scarcity mindset. In other words, when you're growing and developing people, they're going to shine like diamonds. And they may become attractive to other parts of your organization, or maybe even to other companies or other people out there. So they may have other opportunities. People may be recruiting them. And the abundance minded leader does not fear loss because you're being known for an organization that grows and develops people and wants them to have opportunity, whether in-house or outside of your organization. And that's what makes you then a best place to work, which makes it easier for you to always recruit the best talent because you're known for growing people. So keep the abundance mindset in the forefront. Now, also keep in mind that exciting employees are also excited by a growing workplace. Now, if you don't create or produce a growing workplace, the most exciting employees are going to bypass you and go to competitor organizations. And then you're going to be stuck with the dead weight. The dead weight who doesn't want to grow. Maybe people who don't want that exciting workplace. And that's going to limit how far you can take your organization. So when I'm talking about growth here, I'm not necessarily speaking just about size. I'm talking about growing in knowledge, growing in experience, in expertise, so that you have a greater ability to better serve your customers. Okay, so what are the next steps for you then as a leader in your organization? And you have some direct reports, people who are part of your senior leadership team. And here's what I'm going to invite you to do. I'm going to invite you to bring that team together and have that conversation about who are we going to be in the future? What will we look like? What kind of work will we focus on? What are we going to do? What's the contribution we want to make to the world out there? And collectively, you guys talk about that, you identify that. And then collectively, you talk a little bit about what kind of skills, what kind of abilities are going to be necessary to achieve that, and what are we going to need in our people in order to make it happen. And then, as that leader, I want you to say to your team that you're committed to making sure that each person around that table and their direct reports and the direct reports of those direct reports and cascading through the organization, that each person then has those three elements we mentioned, those experiences and job challenges, number one, the training and assessment that may be necessary, number two, and number three, the coaching and mentoring that's necessary to keep up with all of this. And then you, as the senior leader in your one-on-one sessions with your core group, make sure you talk about those three elements for each of your direct reports, and you have a plan in place for what does that look like for them over this next year. And then you challenge them to do the same for their people, who then challenge their people to do the next for theirs, so that you are building the succession planning mindset within your total organization. And of course, along the way, if you need assistance with any of this, this is what we do every day, and we can certainly help you to identify the pieces and also provide some of the solutions that may be required. So feel free to be in touch. In the meantime, have a lot of fun in this design process and operating from an abundance mindset and building a great future. Building a business is a lot like building a house. Your foundation has to support the size house that you build. And if you end up expanding that house, in other words, you're going to build more floors and upward, or you're going to be expanding outward, you're going to need to add some additional supports in order for that house to be viable going forward. Well, that's a lot about what you want to think about in scaling your business to the next level. So I want to just talk about a few concepts that may help you in that scaling process. First of all, when we talk about scaling, we're really saying taking your business from where it's operating now to a point where it can actually serve greater number of people or customers or do a greater volume of work. And a lot of times, organizations start smaller. And because of opportunity and growth that comes in, they have to figure out how to scale up because the requests are greater than they were at the beginning. So, number one, when you're in that growth mode and you have to think about the scaling opportunity, you want to identify what are your best strengths and talents. What are the products and services that are producing the greatest revenue, that you're doing the best at, and that you really enjoy doing? Because one of the principles of scaling is focus. That means there's some things that you used to do back in the past when you were much smaller that now you're making a decision to stop doing. That's no longer where the profitable path forward exists. And you're crafting maybe a more segmented or focused path forward than you had in the past. So, number one, in identifying that strength and talent is learning to say no to some things and yes to other things. And it's not either or, it's both. You're saying yes and you're saying no. That's what makes your business scalable. So this leads to number two. It means thinking about this and planning ahead. Obviously, at the very beginning of your business, if you could imagine building that house for the growth, you would build a deeper, bigger foundation right from the beginning. Sometimes we don't know that, and we may not have planned ahead from the beginning. However, we're in the middle of it, and we can plan the next level of growth. So think about that, what you're going to be putting on that foundation, and what else is going to need to be in place before you continue any further. So that's number two. Number three, I would say this is that from the executive suite, you can't always see what's happening down in the trenches. So it's going to be very important to ask the workers who are doing the job daily what it is that they need. What they need might be in the form of equipment, might be machines, it might be other employees or workers in certain positions. It may even be new positions that don't exist today in order to fulfill the mission and to provide the best products and services to customers. I find that in a lot of organizations that are scaling, they end up needing admin and support staff. And a lot of times this is not valued highly by the organization because the organization sees it as a cost. However, if you've got an executive who is making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and now they're spending a lot of time doing administrative work, that's an overpaid administrative person. Free them up and let them go ahead and do the high-level work that you're paying them for. Bring in the administrative staff to take that load off. I'm thinking about the military as an example here. I know that when officers reach the rank of general officer or admiral or the flag ranks as they are called, they are provided a lot more resources than they had even as full bird colonels. So they're going to have drivers, they're going to have admin people, and almost everything in life that you think that they could do on their own, there's an aide or someone there who's going to do it. They're not doing those things themselves. You also want to be asking your people about what new skills they need, what new learning and development they require in order to do this new work that's going to take you to the next level. So, again, don't assume you, as the executive, that you know it all. You're going to have to reach out to the people within your organization and those who are doing the work and get their input. Let them partner with you in the process of moving forward. Similarly, number 4, you're also reaching out to customers as partners, and you're finding out what has delighted them the most about what you do and your services, and what else you could do that maybe you haven't even thought about that would delight them even more. So let them also be a part of the process, because after all, you are building these products and services for their benefit as well. And then number 5, even though I'm mentioning this last, it does not mean it's least important. This is a huge part of scaling and a huge part of being prepared for growth, and that is putting in simplified automation. And one of the things I find is that as organizations grow, they are actually piecing together systems that worked for them when they were very small. And as they've pieced together all of these systems, they often lose the integrative aspect of those systems working well together. And what that results in is people have to spend a lot of time doing workarounds. Sometimes they have to do many processes and actions manually or by hand that are very time consuming. And not only is it taking up a lot of time, there are so many points where error can be introduced into the system. So you really want to be thinking about systems and systemization and integration of systems. What umbrella do we need to bring in that ties all of this together? And it may mean purchasing something completely new that you don't already have that's more efficient and allows you to work faster and better, more error free, and that also has some redundancies in it so that you have some fail safe properties in it as well. One of the things I find in speaking with client organizations on a regular basis is that sometimes employees are just overwhelmed with the amount of workarounds and manual tasks that they have to do to overcome systems that are no longer working for the level of organization that you have become or that you have built. So, as a business owner or leader, definitely think about automation and systems in your process. So today I have mentioned 5 important steps to massively scale your business. Number 1 is focus, knowing when to say yes and when to say no. Number 2 is planning ahead. Number 3 is involve the workforce. Number 4 is involve your customers as partners. And number 5 is bring in automation and systems. In order to scale your business, it's important to know which one to leverage next. What is your next best step and opportunity? What lever, what dial do you need to turn in order to get there? And that can be hard to assess. It can be difficult to figure out what's the next best step. So that's where I can come in to help shed the light and help you create your next level of growth and scalability for your company. So just give me a call and we can have a conversation. Today, we're talking about how to extend your reach as a leader through the behavior and process of delegation. And the first thing I really want to say is that the primary job of the senior leader is to set vision for the whole organization. to set direction, and also to identify the strategy that the organization is really going to adopt. So that's what senior leaders need to spend their time doing. Now, all leaders in the organization, including the senior leader, it's important for all leaders to develop more leaders. So you really want to spend time developing as many people in a leadership capacity as possible. And the reason is because the more leaders you develop, then the more you can increase the capability of your organization. You'll have more people with more knowledge and ability, and the more that you'll have operations that can be run without your direct control, the more you've got arms, hands, and feet out there in the organization getting the work done. That frees you up to have more time for strategic focus and direction. So, ideally, you want to be able to push decision making down to the lowest levels in the organization so that people are making decisions wherever possible that don't involve you. And that's because if you have to get involved, there's going to be a slowdown, there's going to be a bottleneck, and it's going to take extra time that's unnecessary. Now, a lot of times, leaders really don't delegate because they perceive that there's no one who's skilled, no one who's able to take that ball and run with it on whatever that organizational task is. And that's why that ongoing sense of development is so important. Now, if you find that you're not able to delegate, that means as a senior leader, you will be very much involved in the weeds, so to speak, and in the operations of the organization far too much. And if you're involved in the weeds of the organization, that leaves your business without the strategic focus and direction that it needs. In addition, I find that organizations are far less clear and less efficient when the senior leader is attending to day to day work more than the strategic part of the work. The other thing that happens without strategic focus and direction is that the people in your organization might understand their specific job task, though they're less likely to understand the big picture of what they're doing. So, again, that's the exact opposite of what you want in the organization. So, when you, as the senior leader, when you live in the weeds, your organization gets crippled, they have lost the strategic vision, and this is especially true for those who are in senior leadership because they've been promoted through the ranks. When you've been promoted through the ranks, you understand how to do the day to day business task, and it can be very tempting to jump back down in there and to do those tasks when there's a void or if someone doesn't demonstrate that they know how to do it. Keep in mind, your job is to equip them, make sure that they learn it, make sure that they get it, not to do it yourself. Here are some antidotes along the way. You want to think about it this way. Number one, replace yourself often. That means there are activities that you're doing today. Hopefully, next year, you won't be doing those same activities. You will have promoted yourself to the next level and have hired someone or developed someone on your team to engage in that activity that you did a year ago. So you're going to replace yourself often, promote yourself, and in essence, you're also promoting others. Number two, you're developing others constantly so that you can replace and promote. If the people aren't developed, if they aren't ready, then you're stuck. You have no one to delegate to. And then number three, I would say it's helpful on a regular basis to meet with a trusted advisor, a consultant, or an executive coach, and also maybe meet with some peer senior leaders on a regular basis just to stay focused on what is your real work. That trusted advisor and your senior peers will remind you when you're slipping back into the operational mindset and leaving the strategic view. And so sometimes we can't see ourselves the way we need to. So you want those people around you who can stop and say, oh, look in the mirror, take a look. It's time to promote, it's time to replace. One of the things that I've noted is that the difference between great leaders and those who are even greater is they understand how to leverage the power of their team rather than to do the team's work. So, here's your next step. I'm going to challenge you to sit down and to make a list of all of those tasks as a senior leader that you're doing now and that you really need to replace yourself for, so that maybe 6 months out, a quarter away, or even if as far away as a year, you have a plan that you're not going to be doing that activity anymore. You're going to pass that on to someone else. So that's one list. All the jobs that you're currently doing that need to get off of your plate. And then a second list about who are some people who are ready to take those jobs on now. And if you've got people ready to take them on now, by all means, pass the job on. If there aren't people who are currently ready, who can you develop to get ready? Or if there really is a gap and you're not even sure you can develop people in-house to do it, who needs to be recruited and brought onto the team so that they can take on those tasks and jobs and objectives? And then the third list is, what are the strategic priorities and work that you will finally be able to focus on because you have offloaded some of those day-to-day activities? So, for example, if you're in a manufacturing environment, it might be that you are in the plant overseeing some direct day-to-day activities. However, if you really are the president of the company, what about business development and being out there taking a look at what are some new opportunities? What are some new ways that your company can add value? There's that strategic piece of vision and direction that you always want to be looking at. And what could go on that list? What could you put there for your future and how you will spend your time when someone else is doing this day-to-day operational role? Remember, I mentioned that those who are really, really great, they also have team members around them to keep them on track. So, if you would like me to serve as your trusted advisor and to brainstorm with you what those tasks are that you can actually replace yourself for, promote others into, and promote yourself to something else, give me a call and we'll have a chat about that. Welcome to Run Your Own Race. And this is part of my book, Lead Yourself First, the Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact. So in today's episode about running your own race, as was mentioned in a previous episode, we each have our own unique talents and gifts so that the way that you run your race will also be unique according to your strengths and your talents. So let me tell you a story, really from my book. As many of you know, I used to be in the Army. I was active duty in the Army as an Army officer and psychologist. And every year, twice a year, we had to take a physical readiness test called the PT test, which is something I always hated because in the PT test, we were tested for doing push-ups, sit-ups, and the 2-mile run. The 2-mile run was always a challenge for me. I was never the best runner per se. Most Army people are very good at running. In fact, they love running. That's why they're partially in there, so they can run faster. And so what I found is that since this was not my natural talent or skill, I had to operate differently at the PT test than other people. So just imagine, if you were watching a race and all these people are lined up together and here we are, and then somebody sounds the start at the start line and everybody takes off and they're going 1,000 miles an hour out of the start gate. Now, I already knew that the way my body is operated, that if I started off running 1,000 miles an hour out of the start gate, that something was going to hurt, maybe about less than a mile into this journey, and I probably wouldn't get through the whole 2 miles. So I had to deal with my body a little bit differently and let it kind of warm up to the process. So the best way for me to run the PT test was actually to start off in a way that might seem to most people kind of slow. So if you think about the tortoise and the hare, I was very much the tortoise. And what I had to learn to do was to block out other people and not even see them because they were going to take off and be way ahead of me. And I was going to be like the little tortoise running along from the start line. And then gradually, I would increase speed and I would build up and I would build up till I got to what I called my training pace. And once I got to that training pace, I could actually run at that pace all the way to the end. Or if I wanted to, I might even have a little burst of energy at the end. But I'd be able to finish the 2 miles and pass the PT test. So what I discovered is that when I ran that race my own way, I was successful. And as I was going along as the tortoise, I ran into some hares who had stopped along the side of the road because they got a cramp, they got tired, or something happened. And I said, all right. It just validated doing things in a way that worked best for me. And so that's what I'm really highlighting here is that you have to do what works best for you. And you have to stay focused on what works best for you, number one, and not worry about what other people are doing, number two, or get distracted by what they're doing. So as I've said before in a previous episode, I was talking about my natural sort of allergic reaction to pharmaceuticals as opposed to natural remedies. So for example, in my life, the first thing I'm going to do is choose a natural alternative treatment if I need to get well. And that's because I'm most likely to get well without having some unintended negative consequence also happen at the same time. Now, other people might be able to take the flu shot. Other people might be able to take a pharmaceutical and actually be benefited by it and be fine. Whereas in my case, I come within an inch of my life. So you have to know yourself and what is it that's going to work for you. That's what's really important in this. So the PT test for me is just a visual picture of understanding and knowing that. Here's what I want to ask you to think about. Think about what's going on at work that might require you or your team to run a unique race. Who says that you need to be like everyone else? Your competitive advantage is likely living somewhere in your uniqueness. So think about that. So clearly, I'm really inviting you as a leader to reflect on these questions that I've just been asking you about. Questions about running your unique race. And that means also, as a business leader, thinking about your team, because your team is also running a unique race too. And here's what we know. The organizational race never stops. There are always new challenges. There are always new situations that are coming along, a new race to run. It kind of reminds me of the Army PT test because we had to take it every year, twice a year. It doesn't go away. So I want you to think about that race that you're running with your team. And remember, you are running that race to win. You're running to stay ahead of the curve, to really be out there and to successfully get to the finish line over and over again, not just once. So give me a call, contact me if you would like to talk about how to leverage the unique opportunity for you and your team to run the race that works for you and your organization. And of course, if you don't already have your copy of my book, Lead Yourself First, The Senior Leader's Guide to Engaging Your People for Greater Performance and Impact, please do go to Amazon and get your copy. Look forward to hearing from you. Thank you for listening to The Voice of Leadership with me, Dr. Karen Wilson Starks. I am also your concierge executive leadership advisor But when you need to make tough business decisions, facilitate executive succession and transition, develop your executive team, lead change, create a positive and profitable culture, or leverage marketplace creative advantage, you can reach me at Dr. Karen, Karen, at transleadership.com. Also go to my website, transleadership.com, for more leadership resources and insights. I want to give special thanks to Ron McMillan, gospel jazz saxophonist and national Billboard recording artist, also known as Mr. Sirius XM Jazz Watercolors, for allowing us to use his gifted music on our show. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.